Hi there, my name is Josh Mountain, and I just passed 2,000 subscribers on this YouTube channel, which is an absolutely insane milestone. So every time there's some sort of milestone or goal that I hit, I like to slow things down and try something a little bit different. And I've honestly been postponing making this video for a really long time just because of the fact that, it's really complicated to explain all the ins and outs of it, and I was kind of waiting for some sort of special occasion, but I thought this would be the perfect time, just giving a full breakdown of how I became a software engineer with no degree. Because it always surprises people when I tell them, yeah, I never got a degree, and they're like, but did you go to university? And I say, yeah, I did, but it was different. It wasn't a bachelor's degrry. I don't have a degree to my name. But with all the stuff that I've been doing and all the knowledge that I've acquired in software engineering, people are always curious. They're like, what was the path you took? What did you do to level up your game? What was the whole process for you like? Was it easy? Was it hard? And it's really hard for me to explain everything from start to finish and just have it sit down because it's really just a story. I have to tell the story of who I am, what it breaks down to, and there's so many variables. But you know what? I thought today, try something a little bit different. Try something a little bit different for a 2,000 subscriber special almost, and just explain in real time how I became a software engineer with no degree and how you, as someone watching this video, could also follow the same steps that I took and also become a software engineer with no degree. So for those of you who don't know me, let me formally introduce myself. Hi, my name is Josh Mountain. I'm a software engineer, entrepreneur, and YouTuber, and I'm 22 years old. I graduated university back in May 2021, just 2 years after graduating high school, and I am a full-stack web developer / software engineer and entrepreneur with all the stuff I do on this channel. I've always been obsessed with computers, and the idea of being able to build my own software from scratch on any platform was always the goal for me. I love making videos too, and having this YouTube channel as an outlet to be able to create those videos is awesome, but I love building software specifically for problems that I have in my daily life. Things that I just know could be fixed if somebody would just build an app or build a program for it. Building software just burns a fire deep in my soul just because of the fact that if I see a problem in the world that can be solved with software, I build it. I love the idea of just being able to create that solution and implement it. And first and foremost, those solutions start with the problems that I have. So this was always the goal from the get-go. Now, back when I was in high school, I went through the process of trying to figure out just what the heck I was going to do with the rest of my life. Like many students who are entering their final years of high school and are looking at university options and scholarships and all that stuff, I was looking towards the future with uncertainty. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had a whole bunch of options floating around. Did I want to go to film school to become a director in the industry? Did I want to start my own YouTube channel, which I eventually did, but not for some time after I actually graduated university? And what did I all want to do? But at the end of the day, the solution that I finally came to was that I wanted to be a full stack software engineer. I wanted to be able to create beautiful front-end user interfaces completely coded by me, and I wanted to be able to create back-end systems and algorithms that supplemented those and built cohesive web applications. And not even just web applications, applications on any device. Now, back in 2019, when I was graduating high school, there were so many different options for computer science programs. There were really intensive 3-month, 6-month, 12-month boot camps. There were computer science degrees that took 4 years, and then you go on to your master's and things like that. There were really intense programs where they were 2 years, and it had a mix of everything. And it was honestly just really overwhelming actually making that choice, trying to choose what I was going to do, because depending on which one I went into, it would have great ramifications on the rest of my life. Computer science degrees that were like $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 or even higher than that would obviously put me into a large amount of student debt that I would have to pay off over time. There are some programs that were really, really intensive and much shorter, but still cost a ton of money. And so I just kind of looked through all the options that I possibly could, and I tried to find what worked for me. Now, when it came to the computer science degrees, there was a big issue that I took with the way that the computer science programs, and specifically the courses, were laid out, in that there was a lot of theory in them. There was a lot of theory classes, and don't get me wrong, I love theory, but in my opinion, based on what I've experienced in the process that I've done, there is nothing that teaches you more than just boots on the ground, working and coding and just gaining that experience, because it's going to be much, much harder and much more difficult to learn those skills, but you're going to learn them so much faster because of the fact that everything that's being taught to you is being taught by you as you figure it out, So when it came to computer science degrees, the idea of spending 4 years in a program just to get a degree and not really have any experience behind that wasn't really that appealing to me. It just didn't really jive with how exactly I thought I was going to work my life into becoming the software engineer that I foresaw myself to eventually be. And then again, there were the coding boot camps, which were, like 3, 6, 9 months, but they didn't have any they had credentials behind them, but they didn't necessarily have that credential that really was going to get me in the door of an employer, for example. I didn't really know how those would translate well, and looking at people on LinkedIn and things like that, it just didn't really seem like the right way for me to go. So I was being picky, but I needed to be picky because making the right decision here was honestly going to set me up for the rest of my life. I needed to have all the boxes that I needed to have filled out, and I couldn't settle for anything less. So what were the boxes exactly? What specific criteria was I looking for in an application that specifically would have worked for me? Well, first and foremost, it couldn't be 4 years. I needed a program that was accelerated and condensed, much more difficult, but would eventually get me there much faster. I needed to be able to put in the extreme amounts of work required in a much shorter time frame to get out 2 years ahead of wherever I would have been if I had just gone through a 4-year computer science degree. The second criteria was, how can I graduate with as minimal student debt as possible? Graduating with student debt is obviously something nobody wants to do. If university was free, that would be amazing. But of course, you got to pay for things. So how could I find a program that matched the requirement of being very intense and being a condensed version of a degree with the idea of having very little student debt? The third of which was also that I needed a program that wasn't just heavily focused on the software engineering side. I needed to build skills in other areas that would assist in the overall career that I was going to undertake. The ability to have media in terms of animation, all these sort of things to kind of round me off so that I wasn't just a one-trick pony. Although I did end up finding software engineering, specifically on the coding side, much more my specialty, I wanted to be able to at least learn the skills required and have the resources available to me to actually succeed in my career as a full-stack software engineer, which I eventually aimed to become. So after quite a bit of time looking and researching and cross-referencing every sort of application that I could possibly make to every university nearest to me, all the options that were available to me, I came across one program that fulfilled all the criteria and aimed to give me everything that I was looking for. And that program was called the Digital Design and Development Program at the British Columbia Institute of Technology. So in the fall of 2018, way before the pandemic, of course, I went to an in-person info night at BCIT to actually go and see if this program was going to be the right program for me. If it was going to check all the boxes online, but also check all the boxes in person with the way and general feel of how I just felt about it. Now, at the in-person info night, Big Info as they call it, they had tons of programs on showcase and display, each in different rooms and different sections of the facilities. And this is the first time I'd actually been seeing the campus in person. So I was pretty impressed by everything that I was seeing. So an important thing to note about this program is it wasn't actually in the computer science school inside the campus. Inside the campus, there were tons of different schools, like for carpentry, energy, all different sections of what you could do, and then all the programs within that school would be all related to each other, but within different specialties. Because BCIT is a polytechnic school. It's not technically a university. Polytechnic just basically, there's lots of different specialties that you could go into there. So of course, it wasn't exactly your traditional university experience. But as I said, the program wasn't actually in the computer science portion of the schools. It was in the business program of the school. So within their presentation, they had all sorts of different programs that were a little bit similar to mine, things like new media and design, different aspects, some of them still coding courses, but catering towards a different specialty in what you would actually go and be learning. They did their presentation about the Digital Design and Development Program, still a mouthful to say, and I was impressed. It filled all the boxes I had. It was containing everything that I would need to know to become a full stack developer, all of the front-end development skills, not just on the coding side, but also on the art side of things too. Give you all the business things you need to know, things like digital marketing courses, copywriting, every sort of thing you would want to have in your toolkit, especially as a technical entrepreneur. It was there. It was in this program, and I absolutely fell in love with it immediately. So I went up after the presentation and I talked with the head of the program, someone who I still consider a dear contact to this day. And he flat out told me, he said, I want you to understand one thing. This program is brutally difficult. He didn't mince his words. He said it flat out. He said brutally difficult. So to give you a bit of an idea of how the program actually worked, essentially it was laid out in 2 different sets. In my year when everything started, there were enough students that applied that there were actually 3 sets. But for the purposes of this explanation, as he's telling this to me, we're going to talk about 2 sets. There were 2 sets, and there's 25 people in each set. And he flat out told me, he said, only 16 of the 25 people in one of the sets passed. Meaning that they failed and would have to redo specific courses and they wouldn't be able to move forward with the diploma. Because at this point, it's a diploma. Now, when you hear something like that 16 out of 25 students for one particular set passed, meaning that 9 failed, that's something that's awfully concerning. And I was looking at it and I was like, what could possibly be the reason that that many students failed? And he told me essentially after I laid out my list to him, he said, yeah, everything in this program matches your list, and you guaranteed if you go through this program and you don't quit and you just give it 110%, you are going to get everything out of this program that are in your requirements. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to be brutally difficult. You are going to be working from 7 a.m. in the morning some days to 11 p.m. at night. That's the typical workflow you can expect. And he made a point to say this. He said, because I see so many people come into this program and they hear brutally difficult and they think, oh, I can do that. And then they get into the program and they go, oh, brutally difficult. And then they drop out. And he says, that's another seat, we got to fill. And obviously it's tuition money wasted for the people spending the whole time. And it's just a waste of everyone's time and resources. So we let people know up front that it's brutally difficult so that they take it seriously. But I did it. I signed up. I decided that it was going to be in my best interest to give this program 110% of everything I had. And I would probably come out a better software engineer on the other side of things, provided that I did everything correctly. And oh boy, he was he was not mincing his words. It was brutal, man. That first semester almost killed me. The way the program essentially worked was this. There were semesters, of course, that you would have a certain set of programs that you would do, a certain set of classes, and you would be in that program and you'd have your lecture and then you'd have your lab. So 2 separate classes. Sometimes the lectures in the lab would be right back to back. Sometimes they'd be spaced out. But essentially, for example, I think in the first semester there was 9 classes, maybe 8, 9 classes. 10. Second semester was 10, but 9 classes. Let's just say for the sake of argument, 9 classes in the first semester. And if each of those classes had a both lecture block and a lab block, some classes just combine them together into one extended period, you would be in class literally all day. The classes would start as early as 8:30 in the morning and would end as late as sometimes we would go till 5:30 in the evening. And that was just the actual class portion of it. Putting aside the class portion of things just being in there, with every individual class, you would have a project assigned to you each semester. There was a heavy focus on group-based projects, making sure that you were able to work with your team, deliver great results, and then present it afterwards. It was a very, very, very strong, heavy lean on learning it in class, applying it in an assignment, presenting your findings in the next class. And that was for 9 classes, again, 8, 9, 10, it all fluctuates on what you actually technically consider a class. But let's just say if you had, 9 of those classes, you would have 9 projects constantly going on weekly that you would have to do. And that's not to say all the assignments were difficult all the time. Sometimes you would have classes where an assignment would be fairly straightforward and take you a couple hours to do, but then you've got that class done for the next week, so it's great. But for all the classes that you were doing, you had constantly an array of things constantly going on with different group members that you had to constantly be communicating with, and like 9 different projects ongoing at the exact same time, all about different topics. Some of them would be focused in things like project management side of things, design, coding. Each different project was meant to round off what type of person you would be, whether you end up being a designer, a developer, a marketer, whatever. Every single thing that was done in those courses was meant to figure out what you would lean into. And they told us from the get-go, they said, most people end up leaning towards the design side from the experience that we've had. If people end up leaning towards the development side, that's on them. And then there's people who sit somewhere in the middle. Now, for me personally, I ended up leaning towards the development side, which honestly was a surprise to me because I've always been a very artistic person, but the idea of actually sitting down and being able to code something was terrifying to me. Because here's the thing, I went into this program knowing absolutely zero about coding. I didn't know how to code anything. I didn't know HTML, I didn't know CSS, I didn't know JavaScript, I certainly didn't know any of the frameworks that are currently used in modern web development applications. I didn't know anything. I went in as a complete beginner. But I went in with the assumption that if I went through this extremely difficult process to get through everything after all those late nights, at the end I would come out a seasoned full-stack developer ready to take on the world. Plus, in addition to that, the end of the program promised a 2-month practicum where you could actually go and apply your skills in the real world. So when I started in September of 2019, everything was great. I met these people who, I was probably the youngest person in the class by far. Like most people were in their mid-20s to early 30s by the time they were doing these programs. And so for me, I was really, just enjoying the process of actually being a university student for the first time, meeting people, hearing their experiences. I met some of my friends who I still talk to this day in that program. Great people who are all doing and leading very interesting lives in the different spheres of media that they are particularly specialized into. And although it was brutal, I learned a lot very quickly. I learned HTML, I learned CSS, I learned JavaScript. In the first semester, I was probably given everything I needed to know to build solid applications using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in that first semester alone. And actually in the December of that semester, I actually went and built my own little portfolio website from scratch. Now, looking back, it looks absolutely horrendous just because the artistic style was not there, but at the very least, I was able to take a vision for what I had and build it with code for the very first time. So everything was looking fantastic. We were heading into our second semester. It was March of 2020. Nothing could have gone wrong. And then COVID happened. Now, COVID hit most of us like a truck. Not literally speaking in terms of most of us getting sick, but the fact that when the entire world went into lockdown, we were swept up in that mix of university teachers not knowing what to do. I mean, we literally would have some courses that pretty much just stopped. Like, we had paid for them fully. There was one course I had in particular, it was a video production course, and when we were in person in the class, it was awesome. We were learning video production techniques, things like that, camera angles, and I was loving it. As somebody who had done videography in the past, I was loving the idea of being able to use the camera and then go and do software engineering in my other courses. It was awesome. But then when we went online, there's no material prepared for something like that if you're not physically holding a camera. So it changed from a video production course to a video editing course. Classes where for the first couple of weeks after lockdowns happened, we didn't know what was going on. We had no idea, and most of the classes were struggling to make up material to teach us because this was something that most people had never ever experienced in their lives, and how do you expect to teach most of this stuff online? And that was where the era of literally 19, 20-hour Skype calls, or actually, what did we use? We used Facebook Messenger calls for 19, 20 hours at a time working on projects. Like, we would literally just work on it. Okay, everyone, I'm going to bed. Talk to you guys tomorrow. Go to bed, immediately get up the next day, start the call, or some people would already be in a call, jump in, and you're good to go. And so it continued like that through term 2. But that brings us to term 3, otherwise known as the term of death, as it was referred to by some of the instructors. And I eventually came to see why it was called the term of death. Now, keep in mind, this program was 2 years at $16,000. That's $4,000 a semester. So coming into term 3, my second to last semester, I was pretty worried. I thought, how is this whole process going to translate onto an online model if we're trying to build an application? Term 3 was all about building an app. You are to create a concept of an app from scratch, do all your market research, create a business plan, all those nice things, and then actually go and build the mobile app using React Native and Android Studio to test it, things like that. And for this project, we actually collaborated with people who were at the downtown campus. So whereas we were people in the digital design and development program, those were people in the full stack web development program. So in our group of 5, which consisted of some of the hardest working people I've had to work with in my life, we were hard at work immediately. If you're curious in seeing what the actual presentation for the app looked like, I'll leave a link to it right here. This is where I actually went and reacted to my first time viewing that recording of our presentation. I think I got the presentation recording and I never actually watched it because I was too terrified to, but I ended up going and watching it, and it's really insightful to look back at how far you've come, especially so many years after you've done it. Because building that application was everything to us. It was making it so that we could build an application to show off to potential employers. The whole purpose of this program was to get a job at the end. That was the whole purpose. So by building this application called NoLine, which would essentially track wait times in real time as its own application using community-generated input, well, you would essentially allow yourself to be visible to all sorts of employers. Normally what would have happened is that at the end of the semester, after we had all built our applications, we all would have gone to this big auditorium on campus at BCIT, and we would have done this awesome presentation, and there would have been people from the industry here, from Microsoft and Intel and like everywhere. There would have been people there who would walk up to you, and we were told that, yes, if somebody liked your presentation enough, it was not uncommon to see someone walk up to you and go, we want to offer you a practicum position at our company next semester. COVID did not let that happen. So at our presentation, we had built this application. We were so proud of it. Again, go and watch the video demonstration I did. A couple people from the industry showed up, but you know, most people aren't going to sit through like a 6-hour-long presentation of people just continuously presenting their projects over and over again. And certainly if you're at a point where you're just doing application after application after application, you're just sitting at your computer, you know, you get 2.5 hours in, obviously all of the interest and intrigue about these applications and projects were going to be gone. People would be, you know, playing a game, listening to music, watching a soccer game, whatever they were doing, which is exactly why I asked for my team to go first. And we presented first. We presented first right at the beginning. We were done, and then everyone else went after us, and it was great. Now I hear you asking the question, well, what happened to the whole idea that this was supposed to be a brutally difficult course? It was brutally difficult. Lots of people dropped out. Lots of people did not have the guts for what it took to get through this program, and I felt really bad because, again, I mentioned that this was supposed to be a team of 5 people, right? There was one guy who presented, wasn't from my set, he was from another set, and all 4 of his group members dropped out. So it was literally just him presenting the application. They all dropped out over the course of term 3, building this application from scratch. All of them dropped out except for this guy. So he was presenting by himself. And obviously he was graded differently as a result of that. But it really went in to show you how hard everything truly was. Because at this point, I had learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and I had learned how to do React coding with Next.js and React Native now, and we were presenting these applications. And that brings us to our final semester, where I learned backend development. Now, in the first couple semesters, I learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript. The next couple semesters after that, I learned Next.js and React Native. And now, coming to the final semester of BCIT, I had actually learned how to set up my own database and how to connect my front-end systems to my back-end systems without getting a CORS error. If you're a developer, you'll know what that means. And if you're not a developer, you can understand just how much an error that you have absolutely no idea how to fix popping up could be, how should I say, problematic. And at this point, I was reached out to by someone on LinkedIn who I had been talking with, and I had been to several of his presentations about taking on his company as a practicum. And I did that. And that was an experience. But it didn't really leave me with anything out of it. So let me recap real quick. It's now 2021. From starting in September of 2019 to having the pandemic kick off in March 2020, to having that completely derail the entirety of the end of my program, to having pretty much no industry prospects whatsoever, I was graduating with uncertainty. And I asked myself a simple question. I said, well, you know, in my free time to fund all the technology that I have, I was making videos. I was running my own video company. If you see me on LinkedIn, you'll know that I ran my own videography company for several years and was charging thousands of dollars for videos, and it was a good racket I had going. Like it was good. I would go and make a really high quality video, somebody would pay me, and the time value was not in the amount of hours I spent on it, but on the product that I delivered. That was what I was doing. And graduating university, after not seeing any results from my actions in the form of any employment opportunities, I was at the point where I was like, well, damn, do I just go all in on videography and creation? And so I did. And here's the thing. I was told that I would have a 1-month grace period after I graduated university before I had to start paying rent. That's what my dad told me. He said, you get 1 month. He said, you graduate at the end of May, I'm charging you rent on July 1st. And I said, absolutely. That is an absolutely fair thing. I appreciate that I didn't have to pay rent in university, but now I actually obviously have to go get a job. And so I thought, videography, yeah, that would be great to do. So in May of 2021, I just did videography. And I made about $4,000 gross, which was, you know, a lot for me at the time. It was a solid amount to be pulling in just from freelance videography work. But after a month of doing it, I came to realize very, very fast that running my own videography company, hiring people to scale up operations, and trying to do different angles and recording videos and things like that, it wasn't what made me happy. People always say the thing, oh, if you do what you love for work, you'll never work a day in your life. It's not true. It's not true. I can solemnly tell you that it's not true. There are specific industries where that can be true, but for me and videography, it wasn't true. So after a month of doing videography and being relatively successful, I came to the conclusion that even though this was profitable in the short term, this wasn't going to be what gave me the long-term happiness and fulfillment as a career that I was looking towards. And I thought to myself that if I don't use the full stack development skills that I've learned now, how could I possibly attempt to use them in the future. I'm going to lose everything I've learned and worked so hard towards. So I got a job working as a front-end developer. And as I'm sure you've seen from the story on my channel, there have been tons of ups and downs. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, honestly. And now where I'm presently sitting, we are currently on the uptrend. Everything is going fantastic. But that's besides the point. But the worst thing you can do as a software engineer is sit and rest on your laurels. And that includes trying to basically not try and improve your skill set in any way after you finish learning. And that's the problem in the first place, is to consider it finishing learning. As a software engineer, you need to constantly be evolving your skill set, staying up to date with industry trends, and figuring out how you can ensure that your skill set is actually going to be enough to make you as hireable as physically possible, and ensure that you're actually able to deliver solid code for the specific job that you're specializing into. If I just sat and rested on my laurels and took all the knowledge that I had from May 2021 and never did any more courses after that, I would not technically be considered hireable, because the skill set that would be required for most of these full stack development jobs my skill set would match. It'd be outdated. And that's why I took some courses on Udemy. Now, this portion of the video is not sponsored in any way. I don't have any affiliate links or anything like that. I am merely linking to these courses because they were what taught me everything that I know, or not necessarily everything I know, but everything that I needed to know, all the supplementary education that I needed to learn to actually be a modern, present 2024 full stack developer. These are courses by the incredibly talented software engineer Johannes Schmetman, and he is a absolutely incredible full stack software engineer. He goes over CSS courses, HTML courses, JavaScript courses, React.js courses, he's got everything. If you are someone who doesn't have any ability of software engineering whatsoever, and you're looking for some sort of course to put you in the right direction, that's a little bit more on the difficult side, but will teach you everything you need to know, these places are a great resource to start. And as a matter of fact, he actually offers a program which is just called Build a Full Stack App in 1 weekend. I think the program is about maybe 9 hours long. It's relatively cheap compared to other Udemy courses, and it allows you to build a full stack application in 1 weekend. Now, building applications, actually going out and building the applications yourself, is the best way that you can learn after you've got the education side of things. Once you've got somewhere that has solid credentials for university, but can also demonstrate that the skills that you possess are more than enough to make sure that you're hireable, you can go out there and start getting a job doing coding projects. And as you're doing those in your free time, when you want to level up your skill set, you can do online courses, hopefully taught by Johannes Schmetman, just because he's the one I recommend, because he's the one who's the best, in my personal opinion. Again, not sponsored, I just really enjoy his content. You can actually level up your skill set continuously year after year after year. Because if I had graduated from university and never went out and actually got a job, and I had just started building applications from what I knew in May of 2021, I would be so much worse of a developer than I am now, because of the fact that I didn't have all the skill sets built up over the course of just trial and error and learning that I had in the opportunity I was given with this job. Because you need the experience of both. You need the experience of having some sort of university credentials that prove you've done the homework, but you also need to be competent in your role and have evidence of exceptional ability. Evidence of exceptional ability is the one thing on resumes that I never see put anywhere. This was one of the most important lessons that I was taught, because of the fact that I went to a resume specialist, again, virtually because it was during the pandemic, and I gave them my resume and they said, okay, Josh, tell me a bit about yourself. And I said, okay, well, I was doing this and I won a hackathon and I won a couple entrepreneurship content, and they went, whoa, that's a lot of great stuff. But looking at your resume, I would not hire you because none of that is on there. And I went, huh, that's really interesting. I never really thought of it that way. And so they said, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take your resume, and you see that section at the bottom that says references? Gone. We want to keep this to one page. So we're going to place that section that says references with awards and achievements. And I went, okay. So they said, if you could do 3 awards and achievements there, what would you put? And I would go, first place grand prize in the entrepreneurship contest, 3rd place in the hackathon, and dubbed most entrepreneurial at the Microsoft Garage program. And the career specialist went, yep, those, perfect, great. You've got Microsoft in there, you've got all these different things that cover exactly who you are and what you do. Perfect, we'll put those on there, and we'll put your resume there, and good, you're ready to go. And what I found next was probably the most surprising aspect of this whole process for me, was that when I would go into these companies, and I was, I do my technical assessment, that would prove that I actually knew how to code. They weren't just hiring someone who, watched one YouTube video. I was like, it's like, okay, you're gonna code a responsive web page and make the button this color and make it designed this way. I'm like, okay. 5 minutes later, I'm done. I'm like, okay, there we go, good to go. And then they're like, okay, good. Answer the leak code questions, you know how it is. And then after that, when it actually came to the personal portion of the interview, most of the stuff that I was asked about was not in the education section, what sort of applications I built or what knowledge I specifically learned. It was more so focusing on those things in the achievements and awards section. Oh, tell me about that project. How did you get into that? Or how did you concept the idea for this? Or how did you come up with this? And that was the main thing that brought me in. In my program, I was taught heavily that employers are only going to be looking for portfolios. Everything that you need as a software engineer is going to be in the projects that you have. Wasn't the case. What I found very quickly was that a portfolio was completely irrelevant unless you had a stellar resume. Each stage of your application needed to be tailored in a way that would make it easier to get on to the next step. You needed to have a killer resume. That killer resume would get them to look at your portfolio. That portfolio would get you an interview, and then that interview would get you the job. That was the process through which I went through and found to have the best success in. But many people I know don't know how to write a proper cover letter, don't know how to optimize their resume, think that just by having a stellar portfolio of projects that they're going to be hired instantly, when really they don't have any evidence of exceptional ability in their resume or cover letter or in them whatsoever, at least on the outside. And that brings us full circle, right back to what we talked about at the beginning of the video. I didn't want to do a degree because I didn't want to do the theory side of things. What mattered to me the most was actually becoming an incredibly proficient software engineer, incredibly good at what I do, and being able to demonstrate it both in what I actually write in terms of my code and in the way that I connect and work with my team. And that's exactly what I got from my program. It was 2 years of intensive coding experience, learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then a framework for JavaScript for the front end, and that was it. After that, I learned back-end skills like Express, MongoDB, and now learning into C# a little bit. Looking back at everything I went through my educational journey into becoming a full-stack software engineer, I was incredibly grateful for the process of actually choosing the 2-year program over the 4-year program. Mostly, of course, because I got the university credential that most employers would look at, but I also had evidence of exceptional ability from the stuff I did within that program. I gained the knowledge to actually learn how to code and become a full-stack software engineer, and most importantly of all, I had the ability to do an exceptionally good job and show it. And by graduating 2 years early, I could get into the industry 2 years before any computer science students. So that's 2 years of boots on the ground, hard work in the actual field, as opposed to just spent in a classroom learning. So I got out 2 years before anybody who would have gotten a computer science degree did at the same year as me if they started at the same time as I did. And that brings us to the present. I am a full stack software engineer with so many technologies under my belt now: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Next.js, React, React Native, all those things. But more so than just the coding things, I have so many skills that I could go on and on and on about simply because of the fact that I continually level up my skill set. I went through an extremely hard process to get through it. I went through several years of crazy long hours, but practical experience beat theoretical experience every single time. Because all the lessons that they teach you about in theory, when they're actually applied to you, go so much further in actually cementing those lessons into your long-term memory so that you're never going to forget them. And that was exactly what happened to me. It's what's allowed me to become such a great full-stack developer as I am today. But know that I still have so much more to learn. I still need to consistently be refining my processes, doing code adjustments, learning new tips and tricks that allow me to code better, faster, and just be an overall better coder. That's it. That's me, and that's my story. Now, if you're interested in actually going to see me reacting to the app presentation I did at the end of the semester of death, you can go and watch that again right here. It's a great watch, and oh my goodness. Looking back in hindsight, I was so proud of that project. But just knowing what I know now and how much further I've come, I look back and I cringe and I'm like, there's so many things that were wrong about that and all that. But again, I'm going to be looking back at that same point right now. You know, if I'm 27, 28 and I look back now, I'm going to go, my 22-year-old self's coding was so bad. If I had only known this or only had access to this framework. So that's for me. Go check it out. As always, my name is Josh Mountain, and I hope to see you in the next video. See ya.